Black Politics Today, an eye for what's at stake in global politics and your source for the social, economic, and political impact of public policy on the African American community. Your host, Kelly Michael Williams, is a political strategy veteran with an undefeated campaign record and the political experience that spans nearly 3 decades, from Mayor Willie Brown in California to President Barack Obama in our nation's capital. So get ready for a fresh and honest approach on the politics that affect you and your family the most. Now, your host, Kelly Michael Williams.
Welcome to the broadcast. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Kelly Michael Williams. I want to thank you for joining us again for another opportunity here for us to talk about what's at stake right here on Black Politics Today. I want to thank you all for joining us. As always, I appreciate you tuning in each and every week and giving us some insight, wisdom, and support about what we're doing, what we're trying to do, and how we're trying to impact the Black community and let us know exactly what's at stake for us socially, economically, and politically, as well as what we're looking to do in our local area, as well as on our national level, statewide, citywide, wherever it is, because obviously right now during this time, there is so much going on that we need to discuss and talk about. And there's so much that's happening that's impacting us that it's getting kind of crazy. I mean, let's be real about it. Let's be honest about it. It is a point where we need to recognize as Black folks, Black America, we got some work to do. We keep sitting around, messing around and thinking that everything is going to be okay. And we're going to look up and we're going to be back in 1940, 1930, 1910. We might be back as far as, 1876 when we were still locked up in shackles, and we'll be walking around without shackles and still locked up. So that's where we're headed if we don't get it together and look at what's actually happening socially, economically, and politically. And right now, it's going to require some work. It's going to require some hard choices, some work. And we might have to go back like we did 4 years ago and sit on our behinds. It may come to that. And we're going to have to decide, what we're willing to take and how much of it we're willing to take. And if that's the choice that we make, then that's what we're going to have to do. But we have to be ready to deal with whatever the circumstances are that come from it. Or we're going to have to get our butts in gear and get out there and do something about it, which means that we're going to have to stand in line. We're going to have to advocate. We're going to have to become activists and everything else under the sun. And we can't sit on our behinds after we get something done. We got to get out there and keep doing it. So as we get ready to get into that, let me take a moment of personal privilege, because I want to invite you guys out if you're in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, the DMV, or if you want to drive from Philly or somewhere like that. Tomorrow is a vote or a march on the White House. I believe it starts at 11:30. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it's Black Voters Matter, as well as Reverend William Barter, the Poor People's Campaign. They'll be marching on Washington to let Joe Biden know that they want voting rights and they want it now. And so I'm planning on being out there. Many of you know that my mother suffers from Alzheimer's, so I'm her caretaker. So she may either be with me or I may find somebody to come and take care of her while I skip out and go do that. But it's something that we all need to do. We have to get out there, whether it's in your city, your state, wherever it is, and deal with and just get out there and make these senators and in your states do something about what's going on. Because if we don't, Texas, Georgia, Arizona, Florida, all these states are going to do what the heck they want to do. And right now, it's a crime shame that we have 3 Democrats, at least 3 that we know of. There could be some that's hiding in the shelters, but there's 3 right now we know of: Manchin, Sinema, and Joe Biden. All 3 unwilling to get rid of the one apparatus that was created and designed to block civil rights and mainly voting rights in the first place by senators, racist senators fighting against inequality and desegregation. And in 2021, with the Democratic majority on the line, given all the voter suppression laws that's going on in all these states, you got 3 senators still holding on to tradition. Tradition. That's what the hell they're holding on to. Tradition. A tradition that was enacted to stop our behinds, us, black, you, me, who look like us, from being able to even vote, do anything. They're holding on to a tradition that ultimately stopped us from being able to participate in the system, and that will ultimately rid them of their majority. Now, what kind of sense does that make? I'm not a scholar like my guests, but to me, just as a layperson, and if I was out on the street, I would say it a different way. But I know how you guys are with me when saying it a different way. I'm gonna just say that's just plain stupid. That's just dumb. I can't say this. That's asinine. I can say that. You guys let me say that. That's asinine. Okay. So I can say that. But need I remind them that the situation they're in right now, right? That tradition that they're talking about, that was the tradition that a black man would be hung if he even looked at a white woman. There was tradition that said we couldn't eat in restaurants. There was tradition that said we had to go through the back door. There was tradition that said we couldn't own land or a house. There was tradition that said that we were property and not people. There was tradition that said we couldn't even look, if we were talking to a white man, we couldn't even look them in the eye. We had to hold our head down while we're talking to them. Now, these are all the traditions that we have in this country. And they want to hold this tradition up as being some type of sacred tradition because, oh, the minority won't have a vote or they won't have a say. Did they forget what happened between 2016 and 2020 or 2018? When, and in fact, actually, no, from 2016 to 2020 on the Senate side, they didn't have a darn voice. They ran through anything they wanted to on the other side, and they didn't give a darn about tradition. They reduced the 60 vote minimum because I think Harry Reid reduced it for district judges and federal judges, not the Supreme Court, so that he can get some judges through because they were blocking the judges Obama wanted. Mitch McConnell took it further and said, well, we're going to do that for the Supreme Court too, only 51 votes. What happened to that tradition? The 60 vote tradition that they had, they got rid of. And they didn't give a darn about it. And these 3 fools are sitting here trying to hold up a tradition that doesn't make any darn sense and ultimately hurts you, me, and all your cousins and brothers and Pookie and Ray Ray that put their butts in office in the first place. So we're going to preserve the filibuster, the tradition that was put in place to stop desegregation, to stop voting rights for us, to stop everything that was going on when we were coming up. If COVID-19 didn't teach us anything, it taught us to hell with tradition and throw it out the window. Corporations across this country are doing stuff that is quote unquote non-traditional, having their employees, executives, and everybody else sit at home and work, going to Zoom. Stock on Zoom went up, what, 200%, and it was the wrong Zoom. We have learned to do things in some cases better by throwing out tradition. Major corporations are saying employees stay home, work from home, do it there, in spite of tradition of what is required in terms of you being in the office and working a certain number of hours and all this other stuff. And it's that same idea of tradition which is exactly why I'm excited about my guest tonight. His research has uncovered the expected traditions of what high school graduations were like. And for so many of us, when we were graduating from high school, and that, and you know, the idea of going to high school, having graduation, and the people who were selected as our class valedictorian or salutatorian, in many of our southern states, high schools and their traditions expect that the recipients of these honors are and will be and continue to be white. And however, in recent years, that has not been the case. I know it wasn't the case for my nephew. He was the class valedictorian at his school in New Jersey. But I also know that in a lot of our southern states, our Delta region, you have a lot of schools now that their high school valedictorians are Black, and they're Black girls. And they're having a hard time with this. They're like, hold up, wait a minute. This is not the tradition that we're expecting. This is not what we're looking for. We're looking for our tradition where typically we don't see the Black kids, and they certainly aren't the valedictorian or the salutatorian. And they're certainly not going to address my children and tell them what our future looks like, you know, going out from here, going out from college, from high school to college, and where we're going to, you know, what marks we're going to make on our nation. That's not what we want. That's not what we're accustomed to, and that's not what we like to have happen. And so my guest, and I'm excited to have him, has done the research and done the studies and gotten the evidence and put it out there. And unfortunately, he's found several cases that these honors were given to Black students, female students. Unfortunately, those students weren't allowed to either enjoy and bask in the glory without controversy, dimming the light on their accomplishments, or they were required to share that honor with a white counterpart. And my guest tonight champions their accomplishments and shines a light on what he calls white fragility. Joining me tonight to discuss this and several cases that he writes about in his article, Racism and White Fragility, A History of Overlooking Black Valedictorians, is Dr. Jamel K. Donnor. He's an associate professor of education with affiliations in American Studies, Africana Studies, and the Center for Racial and Social Justice at William Mary College. Dr. Donnor worked on racial inequality in education. Donnor's work on race and inequality in education covers the array of topics, including the hot topic of critical race theory, which we're going to get into tonight as well. He's the author of several books, and if their titles are any indication of the content of what's inside them, you guys need to go out and get every one of these books. I'm just going to name a few of them. The Resegregation of Schools, right? And I paraphrase some of these. So the Resegregation of Schools, the Charter School Solution, Distinguishing Fact from Rhetoric, and the list goes on. And there's one out there it's on critical race theory. One of his books is on critical race theory. And of course, the conservatives are trying to take this and make it this all inclusive and make it this revisionist history that they're trying to put out there. But I want to welcome my guest tonight, Dr. Donnor. Welcome to the show. And let me get you in here. Welcome to the show, sir. And man, for taking time out. And we took some time to schedule this and put it together. But I'm so excited that we made it work.
Yeah, Kelly, thank you for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity to speak about my work and speak to your audience about these issues that are particularly pressing the Black community.
Absolutely. If you want to join the conversation, give us a call at 516-590-0143. That's 516-590-0143. Or you can also, in the comment section, I think it is on Facebook and YouTube, you can hit us up there, and I'll try to get to your comments and share those with Dr. Donnor. That's my dentist, Dr. Donnor. So my dentist is fine. So let me put a disclaimer out there now. If I get too involved and I say Dr. Donnor, it's no disrespect. My dentist his name is Dr. Donnor, spelled the same way with a B, and you're Dr. Donnor. So I may have to just say Dr. Jamil. Okay, so I don't mess up and disrespect your name or anything like that. But let's get right into this, Doctor. Tell us what and or maybe probably when did you discover, or when did this issue of Black valedictorians come to your attention?
Yeah, that's a great question. In many ways, kind of to your opening remarks, I came to this topic from a previous research study in the same school district, which is Cleveland, Mississippi. And so it was around 2016, 2017, when a federal judge had declared that the school district in Cleveland, Mississippi, after, approximately 50 years, was out of compliance. The judge decided that the school district had never fell in alignment with the orders of the Brown v. Board of Education decision of 1954. And so that right there had sparked my interest in terms of, wait a second, here we are, 2016, 2017, and we're still deciding school desegregation. So after laying out the history, reviewing the lawsuit, particularly the case, kind of seeing how that played out and worked its way into the court, I was definitely surprised when I had come across this story around the same time after the judge's decision that Miss Jasmine Shepard, who was originally named the school valedictorian for the newly integrated Cleveland High School, was told the day before graduation that she would no longer be the sole class valedictorian, and instead she would share the honor with a white classmate. And so then that got me thinking, like, okay, where is this coming from? How did this happen? And so again, I was with the assistance of a law librarian, I pulled the case docket and kind of read through the actual document, learning and seeing some of the shenanigans that went on that resulted in which the administrators adjusted Miss Shepard's grade to make it lower, while at the same time giving the white classmate, wrongly giving her credit that inflated her grade.
When I saw that and read that, it blew me away. Brown v. Board was
1954.
1954, right?
So 1954.
We're talking about 2016, and they hadn't integrated.
They hadn't integrated, and so this school district came up with all these ways to avoid it, from developing magnet schools to creating, school choice plans, and in some respects, even creating segregation academies to avoid. Or in other instances, an IB program in the historically or traditionally all Black school as a way to encourage integration, but not, again, developing these barriers, intentionally developing these barriers to not be in compliance.
And what I find ironic about that is that they get sued. The judge says they've been doing this, and the first student that becomes a class valedictorian is a Black student, right? That they've been for all these years trying to keep out and stop from being able to even participate in their school curriculum or system.
Right.
And she gets a valedictorian, and they're like, "Oh, hell no, we can't have this." And so they block her by putting someone else in there to be the co-valedictorian.
Correct.
Who ended up giving the speech?
That is a great question. I didn't look in that amount of detail. I just know from my conversations with Miss Shepard's mother, Sherry Shepard, she was very distraught, very upset. They both were by this outcome.
I'm sure they were. Now that apparently this is going on in Mississippi all over the state, because you had another case, West Point High School,
yes,
in Mississippi as well, where
Yes.
you found some more shenanigans going on there.
Right.
Tell us about that case.
Pretty much the same thing where, African-American female, again, had the highest GPA, and she was named valedictorian, and some white parents of students, one in particular, felt that the grades were wrongly calculated. And so, again, school district went back, principal went back and said they found a clause or an out in the handbook suggesting, okay, the credits were added wrongly in this way. And so what you kind of see in both cases is that the administration is allowed an out through administrative or procedure. And so, we would call those technicalities, but, it's usually once a white family has kind of said, hey, wait a minute, then it's usually the black student, the black family is the one who get to pay, who are paying the cost for this.
Right.
And so kind of to your point about tradition, expectations. And so this, which is tied up in a school's reputation, which is tied up in history, as you had alluded to.
It's crazy because I can only imagine what these students, these kids are dealing with and going through, because they're looking and they now have the honor being class valedictorian, which everyone understands what that means in terms of college applications and
exactly
and scholarships and everything that comes with that. And to deprive them of that and play, footsies with the point structure and with the administrative clauses and things of that nature is crazy. And even in the case where you had the Shepherds, the same judge who ruled that there should have been desegregated schools and work and what they were doing, dismissed her case with prejudice and ruled that she didn't have a case. How did that really come about, and what was the grounds for that dismissal?
Again, judge name, Judge Brown, she felt as though that she was not, her and her lawyers, Miss Lisa Ross, did not prove that the district acted with malice or intentionality in terms of, and so it's ironic in the sense that the judge is able to acknowledge that, well, yes, Miss Shepard's grades was miscalculated, but not through any fault of the administration. And so it's kind of like this jujitsu / gymnastics that goes on in terms of how were you able to reach that conclusion? Like you said, on the one hand, you said that the school district hadn't complied with desegregation for almost 50 years, for over 50 years. And on the one hand, you're saying that, Miss Shepard, was stripped of valedictorian, the award of being distinguished of being valedictorian, and that for some reason you don't see the connection between the two. And so
there is no connection. I mean, if you're going to rule that that there was malice in the fact that how they did not segregate the schools, and then there was malice in how they operated, and there is a mode of operatus, modus operandi of what they do, then but they recalculated and they calculated her scores, but it wasn't with malice. Well, it certainly was with some intent, because they took her from where she was at the higher grade point average and reduced it. Now, there was no need for them to go back and recalculate her grade point. They had already done that. The point was to calculate the other girl's grade point, and as I think as your article says, she had courseworks on there that weren't even approved or valid for the effort of even getting credit for any credit towards her GPA and valedictorian.
And the judge acknowledges that distinction and still ruled against Miss Shepard, which is why they then, her and her lawyers and her family, appealed it to the Fifth Circuit. The Fifth Circuit, declined it. And so it got sent back. And like you said, it was dismissed with prejudice. But then moving forward, again, staying within the theme of tonight's conversation, that's where the whole salutatorian case comes up, where there's another case, same school district, same school, same administrators, where a Black female was supposed to be the first salutarian in this school. And again, for reasons unknown, she's stripped of this sole distinction and has to share it with a white male student this time.
Wow.
So,
wow.
And that case was recently Alicia James is the case. Alicia James v. Cleveland School District. I was just one of the beauties of this case is that Ms. Shepard's mother and I, Jasmine, we've been we communicate at least once a month via email. She gives me updates. So since, before I go back to the James case, so since her case, Jasmine actually she went on to Ole Miss, University of Mississippi at Oxford, graduated with a political science degree, I believe. And interestingly enough, based on her experiences, she wants to go to law school. Whereas Alicia James, their case was dismissed, but they're filing an appeal right now, and it's under hearing right now.
Yeah, well, I want her to go to law school, and I want her to come back with a vengeance and tear it up, and represent every student out there, especially in cases like this, because it's just crazy to me, the egregiousness of what we're having to deal with now. Most of us look at it as the crux of 2016, 2017. But the reality of it is it's been brewing underneath the surface for so many years. They just found boldness in 2016, 2017 to just come out and start saying and doing it. And that takes me into this critical race theory that so many folks are fighting against, arguing against, and saying it's turning the hands of time back, and oh my God, you're saying that we're immoral and we're just racist. Okay. Do you want to go back and start reading the Constitution? That thing you used to carry in your breast pocket? Let's go back and read that. Let's go back and read that and see exactly what it says and what it means, and where the words lie and the impact lie. Talk to me about critical race theory and what is the true definition of critical race theory and where it originated from, and then I'm gonna ask you some questions about that.
Okay. So critical race theory is an amalgamation of critical perspectives that looks at the various ways that law, most notably law as it was originated, came out of law school, the legal tradition, where you had a bunch of legal scholars, constitutional scholars, most notably Derek Bell, Kimberly Crenshaw, Cheryl Harris, among others, saying, "Hey, look, the momentum, the progress that we thought that was coming out of the civil rights movement has stalled in some cases, and if not, has begun to regress." And so, for these scholars, they wanted to understand in what ways does the law, or what role does law play in perpetuating and maintaining these inequities. I'm not sure if did I answer your question?
Okay, yeah, that's good, because the way that and I should have it written down. I'm thinking of the guy that's out there now that's talking about critical race theory, and he's going across the country to try to get all the schools to eliminate critical race theory from teaching. The way I understand it, critical race theory isn't even taught in elementary school, middle school, or high school. Is that correct?
Yes, critical race theory is barely taught at the undergraduate level. It comes out of law school. So again, you have to have an advanced degree. You have to have graduated from at the undergraduate level in most instances. Some doctoral programs in education have critical race theory classes, but again, to your point, not only is it not taught at the K-12 level, it's seldom taught at the undergraduate level. So these individuals who are out here chiming out against critical race theory, one, in most instances, have not read anything related to critical race theory. And I'd be quite honestly, I don't think they care to read anything. But again, it's kind of it's both a political boogeyman as well as a dog whistle.
Right, right, and that's really the latter is what it really is. It's out there saying, look, they're trying to teach our kids that this is racist, and white people are all white people are racist, and that's not true, and that's not true. But yet, everything they talk about, because I believe it was in one case where they're basically saying that race, economics, and social status are the identifiers of what we are assessing and applying to white America at a different measure than we're applying to Black America.
Right.
And then as a result of, we're saying that white America has privilege that Black America doesn't have.
Right.
Well, that has already been determined. That has already been identified and recognized that is the case. So
Yes.
to then come back and say, but that's not the case, is why I said revisionist history. That's not the
Right.
case. No, it's not. It's Black America who's trying to perpetuate and say that we're all racist. I'm sorry. I think it was white America who created Ku Klux Klan. It was white America who started slavery. It was white America who said we're only 3/5. It was white America who said this. Now, there has been a change and a shift in that,
Right.
where you have conservative compared to progressive and liberal. But the fact of the matter is that Black America didn't come up with critical race theory. It was white lawyers, white professors that were teaching and identifying why is it that this happens, and the result is that African Americans are the ones who are harmed by it, and white Americans are the ones who benefit from it.
Right.
Did I get that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that many of the quote unquote opponents of critical race theory fail to acknowledge or choose not to acknowledge is that a lot of the key contributors were white academics, most notably the late constitutional scholar Alan Freeman, where he just kind of looked at these broad terms that America is based on: equal opportunity, issues around liberty were used as legal tools to justify racial inequity, systemic racism. You know, kind of to your earlier point about property, who could own property, who could transfer property to their family members, and what that means for intergenerational wealth. So again, when you start to unpack it and look at the ways in which law has kind of helped to create, perpetuate, and maintain inequities according to race, yes, to your point, it started out very explicit, very overt. And over time, it has transformed into more passive, tacit, and implicit ways. And then we saw again with, 2016, hoods came off. They said, forget the dog whistles. We're gonna trade in our dog whistles for bullhorns. We're gonna make America great again. So again, critical race theory is about really trying to understand the law's role in maintaining inequities, not just according to race, but a intersection of positionalities and identities, whether it be sexual orientation, whether it be class, whether it be disabilities. And that's the piece that gets left out also, is that, there's a subsection of critical race theory called critical whiteness studies, which looks at the reasons why and looks at how these same laws that they espouse as colorblind actually hurt white people, hurt poor white people.
Yes. I mean, that's the part that is mind-boggling to me as well, is that poor white folks are in the same position as Black folks are. Poor and not poor Black folks in a lot of cases, and same as Latinos, same as some, Asians, people of color. Collectively, with poor white folks, we're in the same boat together. And I think that's one reason why Reverend Barber is so successful in being able to pull white Americans with him to impact this Poor People's Campaign, as well as what most people don't recognize the Black Panthers were able to do back in the day too, was pull white folks with them too, because they were fighting the same fight.
Exactly.
But I also know that Thomas Jefferson said that, we have to have an industry of poor white people so that the upper class of white folks can do better. And they would always tell them that you're better off than any African American. So that they would always believe that even though they were poor, they were better than African Americans. And this was coming from Thomas Jefferson. Okay. And he and the policies and procedures and things that he put in place impacted them just as much, but they were targeted at us.
Exactly.
And I'm like, help me understand this idea that you guys are going out here talking about this critical race theory is, you're just trying to call us all bad people. No, we're not calling you all bad people. But however, okay, there is some history behind this that gives us the cause and the pause that we have to recognize, that we have to look back at our history. Ideally, as it says, you look back so you don't repeat it, but yet still history repeats itself and we still come up with the same thing. Talk to me about this idea of white property or whiteness as property.
You kind of alluded to it where even the lowest of the lowest white person in their mind believes that they're still better than the most accomplished African American or person of color, as that matter. And so with this notion of whiteness as property, there are a certain set of expectations that come with it just from being white, whether it be the right to have access to good schools, an unfettered access to government resources, things of that sort, where just being able to walk down the street, leave an interaction, the expectation that you're going to leave an interaction with a police officer alive, unmaimed, unscathed. I mean, all these things that that disproportionately happens to Black people and other folks of color, white folks don't have to think about. And so all that encapsulates whiteness as property, from having the same level of education and getting paid more than your Black counterpart.
Right. Or working on a project and deciding you're gonna go to a lakefront and chill out while everyone else is sitting back there, doing all the work. And seemingly everybody else is all people of color sitting behind you, but you're gonna go out and go party with your boys, or maybe even the Karen syndrome. Maybe it's the Karen syndrome of picking up the phone, calling the cops on Black folks because they're walking down the street, or they're walking a dog, or they're
or if you yourself inform them that, hey, you're breaking these shared rules, these policies and procedures, and the backlash you face because no, those rules don't apply to me. Those rules don't apply to me. They apply to you. Like to your point about with the bird watcher, where all he was doing was saying, look, you're not supposed to be here with your dog. It's a posted sign.
Right. Well, no, you're not supposed to be here at all because you're harassing me. You are assaulting me, and I'm going to tell the people you're doing that. While you're being videotaped.
Exactly.
And you're not able to recognize you're being videotaped to shut up and stop talking. You're just going to sit there and say, yeah, he's doing this to me. He's doing this to me. I'm going to tell them what you're doing to me because you're Black. And I'm going to be able to do this.
And the fact that you feel confident enough that you can do that and get away with it, and know that the white police officers, most likely white police officers, are going to believe you over this man who, again, was Ivy League educated.
Yeah.
I mean, all that is part of whiteness as property.
And what we're dealing with now, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, and if I'm overextending my thought idea of the I'm going to use the term fear, but I'm also going to use the term of probably a reality check of America browning and becoming more brown and more black. And now the studies are showing that this past census was the first year that white America has declined in population compared to black and brown America. Are we seeing these critical race theorists and these whiteness is property and these rules of racial standing shifting because of the idea that they're no longer going to be a majority of mass to be able to control everything? So they have to change these policies and procedures to ensure that they can still control the economic structure that we live in this America.
I would say yeah, but also make with the caveat this I would make the argument that this dates back to the election of President Barack Obama.
Yeah.
I think his election was that triggering moment for white America. Like, yo, we lost our country. No matter the fact that, you know, he was the cream of the crop, not just of black people, but of white people. I mean, Ivy League educated, Harvard Law Review, first black. I mean, and to this date, there still hasn't been a scandal to come out of that two-time presidency.
Right.
I mean, so I think the election of Barack Obama was that triggering moment because white folks have always known that there was a impending demographic shift. But again, to kind of to your earlier point, your opening monologue about waking up and doing something in the politics, I think that is when white America really saw like the power of voting, the power of multiracial collaboration, multiracial bonding, particularly moving around broader social issues that encapsulate and affects people across racial lines, gender, class lines, things of that sort. So now this recent report that came out of the Census Bureau, I think is only just going to intensify, you know, the backlash politics, you know, that one can make the argument started in 2008.
I tend to agree with you on that because when that happened, because if I remember vividly that Black America was like, yeah, brother's cool, he's good, he ain't gonna make it. Right? He ain't gonna make it.
Right.
And it wasn't until Iowa when we know that it's only white folks in Iowa, you know, 1% African American.
Right.
That Black folks woke up and said, okay, wait a minute. Huh?
Right.
And then he, you know, New Hampshire.
Right.
Okay, wait a minute. Let's see now. Now we know we Hillary gets it, but
right.
You know, she doesn't get it by much, and it's like okay. And then of course you get down to South Carolina, and it's a land, and then all of the Black caucus start changing their endorsements. John Lewis starts it off. Then you know, Clyburn comes back, and then a few others, and a few others, and a few others, and there's that shift. But
yes.
I tell people all the time, it's like, you know, white America elected Barack Obama. We did it, but it wouldn't, if it was just us, it wasn't going to work. White America came in and put their foot in, just like Black America elected Joe Biden. White America elected Barack Obama. And, I think you're absolutely right in that sense that at that point, when McConnell came out, said, I'm gonna make sure he's a one-term president. And before any policy started, they called him a liar at the State of the Union. They did everything they could, you know, the monkey images, the this images, that.
Bro, the birth certificate. I mean, they gonna how he's not a U.S. citizen. I mean, we saw the Tea Party. I mean, we didn't hear about the Tea Party, you know, until, you know, last time you heard about the Tea Party was during colonial times.
Right.
Now all of a sudden we have a reincarnation of the Tea Party. So I mean, it was all hands on deck.
Yeah, it was. It was completely all hands on deck for everything that they wanted and everything they were trying to do. And I think you're right. It started then because even throughout that whole 8 years, there was just complete turmoil of what they were trying to do and what they wanted to do. And even when he was giving them their own policies, gave them their own policies for the first term. Democrats were so pissed off at him. They were like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And he's like, I'm trying to be conciliatory. I'm trying to work it out. You know, let's get together. They still should have done parallel, in my opinion. They should have rammed through what the heck they could ram through with those 60 votes in the Senate, and then put out those olive branches on the other side, but still done what the hell they needed to do. And I think that's where they fell short at. And that's probably one of the biggest criticisms that most people will have of the administration at that point, because once he lost the majority 2 years later, there was nothing that he can get done for the next 6 years, except through executive order, and except after when Boehner got in as speaker, and then he was able to, you know, force him to actually get some stuff passed. But it was, you know, really of no use or no consequence to Democrats to think about what was at stake. They did not understand what was at stake, and I think that's the same pattern they're doing now and have done, is that they forget about the Senate, they forget about the Supreme Court, they forget about the district courts and the circuit courts, because these are the courts where the laws are actually made. I don't understand why as many lawyers as there is in Congress that they don't recognize that the courts are the ones that are actually going to make the laws. You just wrote them down and said, is this good or is it not good?
Bruh, I say all the time, I respect the Republican playbook because they played a long game.
Exactly.
They played a long game, and they wait you out. They understand where the power is. It's in this, and I say it all the time. It's in the Senate, and it's in the Supreme Court. Y'all can have the White House, but those two branches, man, Republicans and they don't know compromise. They don't want no.
There is no compromise, and that's why I'm just like, what the hell are we compromising for? What are you talking about? They're going to take away our right to vote. They've already taken it away in the Supreme Court, and now you won't even pass a new law to put out there because you're waiting for them to come over onto your side of thinking.
Right.
When the hell have they done that in the last 12 years? Okay. In the last, 12, 15 years, 2008? When have they done that? They have not.
Bro,
they not. So why are we holding on to tradition?
Man, like I said, I love the Republicans because they play to win.
They do. I you know, as much as I dislike them, I respect them wholeheartedly. Okay?
Exactly. Because they play to win and they play the long game.
And they have a message behind their madness. They will put a message behind their madness, and they would run it for 2 weeks or 10 months, and they come up with a new one.
And the other thing is,
around with it.
And the other thing is, they're all in lockstep. And if you're not in lockstep, they're gonna boot you out.
You get cut. You get cut. You get no money. You get nothing. And I'm like, what? Come on now. Let's do this. Exactly. So talk to me how we deal with this CRT and defining it, because right now the message is, and what's happening in these schools is that, I mean, Texas, for instance,
right?
We pass a law that says the KKK was not immoral. They were just a group of organizers that were for states' rights.
Right.
What the hell?
Which is code.
Right.
Right.
I mean, and yet that bill and others, I mean, I get the fact that the Republicans are in charge of the state legislature, but the idea of that bill passing with no counter narrative, no counter argument, no counter to the reality of what the KKK stood for, why, when, where, or anything else of CRT anywhere here in Virginia. I mean, you know, you're in Virginia at William Mary at Virginia. I mean, they're trying to do that across the state of Virginia.
Yes.
Florida, everywhere. Why isn't there a message behind it? And is that a message that comes from, you know, Congress, Democrats, or does it come from the educators? Does it come from you guys?
I think it comes from the educators, but I also think it also has to come from citizens. So let me take a step back. I think one of the reasons why this anti-CRT movement has been so successful is because it's so coordinated. I mean, like you said earlier, the messaging is the same, but also the resources that are put behind it. You have wealthy donors who are funding this movement, and so then you also have a certain strata of white folks, particularly upper middle class, who kind of have the free time to attend these school board meetings, to sit on these school boards, whereas, poor working class families don't have that luxury. So again, you got to have that luxury to do that. So I think it starts at the local level in terms of really getting out there, really being active in school politics. Who's running for the school board and why. Go to the school board meetings, begin to get things on the record. And again, kind of like what we alluded to, in some respects, borrow from the Republicans and the conservatives playbook.
Yes.
And it doesn't have to be on this large grand scale, but start somewhere, whether it be grassroots, small donations, things of that sort. I've had several colleagues here at William and Mary who have ran for the school board because they're not liking what they see. They see the inequities for students of color, whether, or English language learners, second, ESL students. And so that's some of the impetus for them doing that. So it starts at that level. And then I think it begins to bubble up. Yeah.
And now there was one thing that you talked about in your article, or in one of the articles I think you have, you talk about critical race theory 2 is better than 1.
Okay. Oh, I was talking about the different methodological approaches, because going back to the Mississippi case, it was so complex where, in the one hand, you had it again where the plaintiffs, Miss Shepard and her family, weren't necessarily able to prove intent, weren't able to prove malice, but yet there's still this racial undercurrent. There's still this anti-Black undercurrent. And so what are the ways in which, how do you make sense of that? How do you begin to identify that? So that's why in that particular article, again, where I do discuss how after the DSEG decision, the decision to integrate the public schools, this notion of white flight came up. And so that was one of the reasons why the can was kicked so far down the road for so many years. And then people were worried that even once the verdict came in to consolidate the schools, that white families would, leave the public schools and then go on to private schools.
But this was a civil case, so why did they have to prove malice? I thought that in a civil case, it's just the preponderance of the evidence of the fact that they changed the grade points. There was no valid reason for them to change an ad, and the Miss Shepard had the GPA, and Miss Bosch was trying to say, well, no, it should be mine for a class that was unaccredited.
Well, because the policy didn't because it wasn't explicitly written, the policy was vague enough where it gave the administration an out. Wow. And so therefore the lawyers, the petitioners couldn't necessarily prove that it was intentional, right? Because that's kind of the theory, the premise behind the 14th Amendment. One of the reasons of the 14th Amendment is that intentional acts of racism, that's what is meant to discourage that. And so that's where then we begin to see this whole notion of color blindness come out of that, and colorblind forms of racism, because the 14th Amendment, again, relies on intent. And you have to be able to demonstrate intent.
All right. So what's the psychological impact on these students and families when they are put in these positions where they, clearly and rightly are should be the recipient of these honors and these awards, and thus they've been trying to, they've been studying, they've done the work, they put in the work, and now only to get there to say either you're being stripped of this because we can strip you, or we're going to make you a codependent or a co-valedictorian, co-salutatorian, and basically take away the impact of it as you being the only one and now you're a partner with somebody else.
Right.
And the idea is like, well, if they didn't give the speech, did they give both speeches, or did they give the let the other person give the speech and the other person was just recognized?
Right.
Was the black girl just recognized and the other person was actually given a speech, vice versa? How does it happen? But what's the psychological impact on these students from that, from your standpoint?
Oh man, just in my conversations with Miss Shepard, Miss Shepard's mother, Sherry, I know it was very traumatic, just devastating. And so, let me back up. So devastating, and then but also using that devastation as momentum, as to then go ahead and fight and push through. But also, as you know, when it comes to lawsuits, it's a long, windy process. And
Mhm.
so, and in this particular case,
Arduous and expensive.
say what? Yes,
Arduous and expensive.
exactly. And so, dealing setback after setback, it can get defeating at times. And, in my exchanges with Miss Shepard, she's always talking about, I'm holding out hope. I'm holding out hope that the judge will rule in our favor. And, when she told me that even once the decision was dismissed with prejudice, she was deflated. And so, I gave her a couple of weeks, and then I just kind of hit her back, yo, just wanted to check in. She was like, I'm good. But I just think that there's an unseen psychological cost that comes with this. And so, particularly on the family members, as we as Black folks try to move through and move up through the socioeconomic ladder, that it can have that psychological impact that can stay with you in some respects, like we saw with Jasmine, or like I discussed with Jasmine. She's kind of used that as motivation to go to law school, to then become a lawyer and then fight these cases, or fight on behalf of individuals who are somehow experience injustice.
Isn't that the playbook to
What's that?
psychologically break us down? That was the playbook in slavery, to psychologically break us down. I mean, and it seems like in every step and every point, the ruling party, if you will, so motivation is, if they can, like we say, if you kill the head, you can kill the body.
Right.
If you can psychologically defeat us or psychologically imprison us to make us feel like we're still slaves, or we're still three-fifths of a person, or we're still property, or we have no rights, or we have no ability, then we
Mhm.
won't fight the fight that's been ingrained in us to do, with the tenaciousness and tenacity that we have within us, which makes us as a people. Why I think you said it either in your article or here tonight, where I think it was in your article. I think it was in your white fear, white flight article, where you said um, white America is feeling that if they can prevent us from being able to integrate, or get into their schools, or stop us from getting into their neighborhoods, or stop us from getting into their corporations and companies, then they won't have to worry about us exceeding beyond them, or moving up above them or ahead of them, because I think that goes into your white property metaphor, or whiteness as property metaphor of that entitlement of what they feel that they're supposed to have, compared to what they feel we're supposed to have, or where we are. And the idea that as soon as you integrate, or you lose a case for integration, the first valedictorian is a Black woman, a Black girl, and she beats out what you expect and what you think.
I think that's part of it, but I would actually I would kind of flip the other side of that coin and say that I think it's as much a psychological play for Black folks as it is, if not more so, for white folks. Because if Black people are able to demonstrate, when provided the same opportunities, they are just as good, if not better, it disrupts one of the foundational pillars of white supremacy. And so if white supremacy in the United States has been saying blacks are intellectually inferior, whites are intellectually superior, and we get rid of all the barriers, and everyone starts at the same starting point. And if black folks can regularly demonstrate trend, whether it be patterns, trends, that they are just as gifted, just as competent as white folks, then what does white supremacy have to stand on?
All right. So talk to me, what's at stake for us as we get ready to close out? What's at stake for Black America? What's at stake for us with this critical race theory? What's at stake for us with the rules of racism and the whiteness as property? And how do we begin to move forward in 2021 when we're dealing with stuff that seemingly we should be past by now? What's at stake for Black America moving forward, given even what I talk about in terms of the filibuster and just our ability to even vote. I mean, the basic tenets of our constitutional rights are just slowly eroding and being stripped away from us at every state level, and the federal government or the federal Congress is doing nothing about it. What's at stake for us overall with CRT and all that we're facing?
Well, what's at stake, one is, again, what's taught in our schools, because also one of the things that this whole anti-CRT movement is trying to do is also pushing back against the 1619 Project from the New York Times.
Right.
And so what's at stake is also what's taught at schools, a more accurate depiction of history in the United States, and really understanding what this country was founded on and how that has continue to evolve over the years. There's that piece. Also, what's at stake is who controls the schools, who controls the information of what gets taught in schools. And again, then also with that, how Black people are treated, because that's the other piece that comes out of this. It's not just about it. So the one piece is just not about what's taught in schools, but also about how Black folks are treated, how Black folks are seen, how Black folks are viewed within the society writ large. And so again, to your point, it has to take place at multiple levels, not just at the polls, but at the, school board meetings.
And with that, because you really touched on what's being taught, and I know that's one of the things that they certainly want to get out of school is slavery. Not that they're teaching it now anyway, but they want to get that out of there. They want to get out the fact that the treatment of African Americans by white America under Jim Crow, under Black codes, under Reconstruction, under all the under 1950 and 1960, 1960,
right?
Under 2000, 2010, 2020, May of 2020, right? Memorial Day 2020. They want to get away from all of that, and I think the teaching and the revisionist history is where we're going with that, and it's ironic. I sit there and I listen to folks say, "Oh no, that didn't happen. That never happened. What are you talking about? Are you kidding me?"
Right.
So we're gonna burn all the history books so you never see it again. And the reality is that's what they want to do. They burn the history books and create a new history. Where's it going to be written at? Who's going to write it? How are they going to
exactly? No, this is. In many ways, this is the battle for the soul of this country. It really is. It really is. And so it's a multi-pronged fight. And so again, schools are a microcosm of our society. Schools and voting; those things go hand in hand.
So what's your next project? What's the next thing you're reaching out to? Because you're gonna be on my direct dial, bro. I'm telling you right now. I'm calling you, reaching you out like, hey, these articles I'm reading right now, I'm like, oh man, yeah, we can use this. We got to talk about this. So yeah, what's your next project, and how are you doing? What is it that you're teaching there at William & Mary, and how can we get in touch with you, and how can we follow you?
Oh man! So ironically, interestingly, what I'm teaching in the fall is critical race theory in education. It's an undergraduate and graduate course. So looking forward to that. I'm currently working on a project with my graduate student who's actually a lawyer by trade, but she decided to, she didn't like practicing law, so she wanted to go back and get her PhD. And so we're writing a book, or we're in the process of writing a book prospectus where we want to talk about the ways in which the Supreme Court has maintained white supremacy since Brown v. Board of Education. And so, yeah, kind of to your point, our particular twist is looking at the role of the originalism, what these Supreme Court justices and all these conservative legal scholars want to put out there is strict constructionists. And we're basically saying that's a white patriarchal lens. That's a view of the courts that goes back to antebellum times. And so how that logic of originalism inverts policies such as Brown to make them appear to be inherently racist toward white people.
Wow. Yeah. I want to read that.
Yeah, so we're working on that. Definitely excited about that.
Man, oh man. See, I usually end with what's at stake, but bro, you didn't start a whole new fest out of me, okay? But I have to thank you. I want to thank you, Dr. Jamel Donnor. It has been a pleasure. I know that I have been just intrigued and inspired by just so much that you've talked about. And
thank you so much.
And following your articles and reading your articles and being on the website that you post on and put out there. Certainly, please be open to becoming, reoccurring, coming back on the show again. When I see something, if there's just something you want to put out there, just call me. All right? If you got the book ready and you ready to release it, just call me. Say, hey, Michael, can I come on the broadcast? Absolutely. We'll put it out there for you anytime, anywhere. And definitely, I'm going to reach out to you as well when we get offline. I would love to see if Jasmine is ready or prepared, if she would like to come on and talk about her experience and what that means, especially now that she's looking to go into law school and to fight the good fight of what needs to be addressed for those that are coming behind her. I would welcome her and her mom on the show, either or both, to come on and discuss that and talk about so that parents can see and understand what's going on and how to address it, because clearly it was this wasn't the first time. And I think you started with a case in 2012 that's led up even to here now. So there have been a number of cases out there, and now it's on my radar. So I'm certainly going to be looking for them and looking to discuss and bring it to attention. So please reach out to them, let them know. I'll get back via email and we'll do that. But certainly, please bring more to us, insightful, because this is something that we need to understand and need to know. And as I tweeted out, you're going to want to know this. You're going to want to be a part of this and understand it. So certainly, I appreciate your insight and wisdom, and your work. The research and the work that you have done is phenomenal. So thank you, sir. Thank you. And I'm so glad that I've been able to connect with you, and I appreciate it. Any last
Michael? Oh man, thank you for the opportunity. Look forward to working with you, collaborating with you in the future. And yeah, I will definitely put you in touch with Jasmine mother, Miss Sherry Shepard. She believes in getting this story out, because it's not just a one-off, a two-off, or a three-off. I've heard from folks from the 1970s talked about I was supposed to be the black valedictorian of my class, and shenanigans happened. So.
Oh man, yeah. We have to address this, because everything you talk about, from generational wealth to opportunities to everything, one little thing can derail an opportunity and a family and a perspective and a psychic and just the motivation to be able to do anything. And where you were and could and should have been at the height, you end up falling back and then never even school. Never doing, all the things that you were designed to do, that God put in you to do, and you either start regretting it throughout your life, or you get into depression, pharmaceuticals to ease the pain and depression to do this. And I mean, the whole idea, and that's why I said psychological, but the whole idea is critical. And the critical race theory is not the same. My critical race theory is just that.
Right.
What we just laid out. That's the critical race theory for me and for what I'm talking about. But
Right.
certainly, I
Right.
want to thank you for joining us. Appreciate you. And of course,
Thank you.
say, if it's social, economic, or political, it's Black Politics Today. And we want to thank Dr. Donnor for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you again, my brother.
All right. Thanks. Take care.
Thank you. Take care. Black America, I say it all the time. I say it all the time. If it's we have to recognize, we have to understand. I said it in my opening, and I'm saying it in the closing here, is that we have to recognize what's at stake for us. And if Dr. Donnor did not emphasize that and talk about that and lay it out there, just in this concept of critical race theory, or this concept of whiteness as property, and what it means and where it's taken us. If you just look at policy, if you look at state policy, if you look at the lack of federal policy, if you look at city policy, and recognizing that this census that came out and what it's going to do to your states, your cities, your state legislatures, your ability and the impact of financial services and assistance in your state, city, and county. I mean, these things are critical. From responding to that stupid census that you didn't respond to showing up and registering to vote and standing in line, to voting and not knowing, and not just voting just for a ticket, but voting for a purpose, voting for a means of a purpose. And hey, we vote tomorrow. It doesn't turn out the way we want to. That does not mean we don't vote on Wednesday. No, you take your butt back out there, you vote on Wednesday. Okay, fine, it didn't work. So next Saturday comes around, you vote again. Because like he said, and as I've said, and you heard me say it on this show before, conservatives, Republicans, they play the long game. Democrats, they play that darn short game every 2 years. There's never a 4, a 5, or 10-year strategy. It's always a 2-year strategy. Republicans got 10 years out there and they wait. Everyone gets in lockstep and they do it. Right now, you got 9 Democrats on the Hill talking about we're not going to vote on the infrastructure package for the people's infrastructure package until we do the bipartisan one, and then we'll negotiate. If I was Nancy, and I'm critical of her sometimes too, but if I was her, I would strip all of them of their darn committees. Strip them of their committees, put them in the basement, and say, okay, fine, don't vote. Because if that was Mitch McConnell, that's exactly what would have happened. You're not voting? Oh, okay. The next day, someone will be primarying him. The next day, all the donors that gave him money the first time around saying, yeah, we support your opponent. That's exactly what should happen to those 9 moderates. Now, on the flip side of that, she got to do the same thing to progressives who saying they're not going to vote for the bipartisan until they get the other one. Both of them need to bring their silly behinds together and recognize that if they don't get this thing passed, this is probably the only thing that might save their butts from redistricting and reapportionment is this infrastructure bill. Because people are going to get jobs, they're going to get money in their pocket, they're going to get the health care they need, elderly care, child care, everything that they need, they're going to get through this infrastructure bill, the 3.5 trillion, as well as the 1 billion or 1 trillion. They're going to get what they need in both bills. Why are you sitting talking about I'm not going to vote on this one until I get the other one? I don't understand that. That's just asinine and stupid. And you're going to go out there and you're going to double down with your op-ed piece in the Post and the Times and everyone else saying, absolutely not. We're not doing anything. We're the moderate caucus and we're not doing anything. We're the progressive caucus and we're not doing anything. You got a margin of 6 people that's keeping your behind in power. 6. And you BSing over the infrastructure bill that you've been fighting for since Obama was in office. And now you have a chance to pass it and you're going to argue about when you're going to pass it if you don't get the other bill and you're going to get this. I agree you need both bills because I don't trust anybody. So I agree with Nancy in putting them both together because I don't trust the progressive to say they're going to vote for the bipartisan and then vote for the theirs, or the moderates to vote for the bipartisan and vote for the progressive. And I don't trust the progressives to do the other, vote for the bipartisan before they vote for their own bill. And why is it that the Democrats are always in fraction, are fractured in this case when it's stuff that benefits them? It benefits them. I mean, it benefits everybody, but it benefits them. I think they must enjoy being in the minority. I really do. Because nothing they have put forth to keep their butts in the majority from a message standpoint to their actions is saying that they want to keep the majority. Nothing. And I guess they think that, oh, if they get to it, they get to it. This is almost September. This is August 23rd. This is September. Their butts are going to be in another recess in another 30 days. I mean, come on now. The Christmas recess is right around the corner. Then they come back, and what, 4 months, less than that, they're gonna be campaigning. Primaries are starting. I'm Thank you, Dr. Donnor. Thank you. I appreciate you, my brother. I appreciate you. But these are the things that cause me and have me frustrated with what they're doing, the way they do it, and the concept behind what they do. It just doesn't seem to make sense to me. Maybe it's just me. Hey, maybe it's just me. But it would seem to me that when you have the majority, you do every darn thing you can when you got the majority. You don't sit back, you don't wait for anybody, and you certainly don't sit around trying to compromise with the people who don't want to compromise with your ass. You put your agenda forth and you just put it forth. That's what they do. They do it all the time, every time. So why are we sitting back here talking about, well, let's compromise? Compromise on what? Put it out there, get it out there, and do it. That's all you got to do. And Black folks, that's what you got to do. Get out there and do it. Unfortunately, you may be in some long lines in 2022, longer than 2020. Unfortunately, you may not even be on the rolls in 2022. So just make sure 30 days before your election, or 35 days before your election, possibly even 40 days before your election, re-register to vote at your home domicile. Re-register to vote at your underpass. Re-register to vote at your corner liquor store. Wherever the heck you spend your night at, wherever it is that you spend your day at, wherever it is that you sitting down on the corner at, re-register to vote at that location. And if you can put at the corner of Mississippi and Taylor Street, Southeast, and you sign your name, that's where your voter registration card is going to come, to the corner of Mississippi and Taylor Street, Southeast. That's where they got to deliver it. Rural Route 22, the 4th yard sign, that's where it's going to be delivered to. So if that's where you are every day, and that's where you are when the mailman's in the area, that's where he has to deliver your mail to. If you look at the voter registration card, it'll tell you route number or what have you. And you put that right in there. At the corner of 14th and Union Avenue, Northwest. And that's legal, and that's where they have to deliver it to. But you better get out there and register. Tell everybody in your family to do it. And tell everybody out there to get a chair, right? And their own bottle of water and their own backpack. And get out there and register to vote. And sit and wait. Bring your umbrella for it rains, or if it's too hot, or whatever the case may be. Because if we don't, I promise you, if we don't, it is not going to be pretty come 2023, 2024, or beyond for Black America. It's just not. So thank you again for joining us. Thank you for staying around, sticking around, and hearing Dr. Donnor and what's going on. But certainly identify what's at stake for you and your family. Know exactly what impacts you, from the policies locally, especially locally, to what could potentially happen on a national level. Because the reality of it is this: everything that's happening in your state is going to hit you first. What's happening in DC or in Washington with your members of Congress is going to come around. But that's hitting you there in your city council, in your state, that's what's going to happen. And if you out there and you heard what he talked about in terms of the school board, and you have school board children or school age children, run for school board. Run for school board. Run for school board. Run for city council. Run for city council. Run for superintendent. Run for wastewater. Run for supervisor. Run, run, run. Black America, just get out there and run. Don't worry about your qualifications. Don't worry about the money. Just get out there and run. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but get out there and do something. We have to begin to look back at what used to happen in the 50s and the 60s, what happened in 1900, how we continue to move forward even through Reconstruction and back again, and how we just kept fighting and kept fighting and kept fighting. They want to break us. They want to break us down. We cannot allow it to happen. We have to keep moving forward. We have to. If it's social, economic, or political, it's Black Politics Today. And I want to thank you for joining us tonight. Thank my guests, and thank you. And hey, let's see what we do next week. Until then, good night.
Thank you for listening to Black Politics.